From the Southeast Asian capital of the Philippines, Manila. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Coast AM. And hello there, everybody. The sun shines mightily here. Actually, it doesn't. We're going to have thunderstorms, probably. Should be very interesting. I am indeed located in Manila in Southeast Asia, and it's going to be kind of strange. I'm doing the show in an entirely different way tonight. But it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be fun anyway. We're going to find out. Now, listen, first, I want to thank everybody for the thousands of emails that I've received. And I really have received thousands. And they've all been well-wishing and just very, very nice. So, I don't know, all the people, Paul in Pahrump and Mark, who's taking care of my kitties and about to get them. Hey, Paul, Mark, you are about to get them on an airplane, aren't you? My two kitty cats, Abydos and, of course, Yeti, are preparing to fly, and we await only the okay of the Philippine consulate in Los Angeles, and so we're hoping that will occur very soon now because I really miss them. I guess I am now, I never thought of it until now, but I'm actually an alien. I'm an official alien living here. I really am an alien. So that's kind of unusual. It feels kind of strange to be an alien. And I'm also an alien who has a birthday. I'm now 61 years old. Actually, to be honest with you, my birthday was here yesterday in the Philippines. And it's, I guess, today in the United States. So I get I get two birthdays. And if you look up on the website right now, coasttocoastam.com, you will see very quickly that we have, it's a little bit different for birthdays here in the Philippines. And you will see a beautiful chocolate cake that Aaron prepared for me with thank God, just one candle. And on that, right next to the cake, you will see a bowl of rice. So in the Far East, everything, about a third of the diet or so is rice, I would say. And so I have chocolate cake and rice. Anyway, listen, I thought what we might do, we're going to have, in the next hour, we're going to have a guest, of course, Russell Targ, who's a remote viewer. But in this hour, I thought I would answer questions about where I am here in the Philippines. I thought I would answer questions for you about what it's like over here. And I know that you have questions because I have several thousand emails asking questions. I'll go through an example of some of those. But first, let me tell you what we're doing. If the audio sounds a little unusual to you, we are doing a sort of an interim thing with our audio so that we can get audio from point A to point B, in this case from Manila in the Philippines, all the way to Los Angeles, and then, of course, onward from there to the rest of the world. And we're using what's called a Comrex line on a regular telephone line, which is kind of unusual. It enhances a telephone a little bit. It's sort of in between a telephone and what's called an ISDN line. Now, the ISDN line has been approved here in the Philippines, and so it will be coming shortly. In the short weeks, I hope, before it arrives, we'll be doing it this way if it proves to be satisfactory. Now, as I said, I have about 1 million emails here. Here's one. Art, I too have thought about retiring overseas. My plan at the moment is Thailand, but the Philippines has always appealed to me. I've been very concerned about the State Department warnings. Maybe when you get your show back on the air, you can talk about what's going on with your experiences living over there. All right. Well, the State Department, God bless our State Department, they will warn about anything. And there is some difficulty, as many of you know, in the southern part of Mindanao, but it's certainly not here. And I felt no danger, no sense of danger, no sense of, anything wrong. Everything's fine. And then writes another listener, I'm glad you found happiness again. A few basic questions about life in the Philippines, if I may. Do you use 110 volts or 220 volts? Answer, 220 volts is the standard here. 110 volts is available with a little converter, and most of the converters here have 110 volts, so we can do that. It's all at 60 cycles for you tech-type people. What is their currency? Answer, the peso. He says, I'm 65 and retired and receive Social Security and a pension, government and private. If I were to retire there, do you know what my retirement funds, could they be deposited in a local bank in U.S. dollars or a local currency? If another currency is available, what is the exchange rate versus the dollar? The currency here, again, is the peso. The rate varies between about 51 to 53 or 54 pesos to the dollar, and baby, that's really good. I'll tell you all about it. He says, aren't airline flights originating in the Philippines cheaper than the U.S.? I don't know. I don't think so. No, I think Philippine Airlines charges the same no matter which way you're going. Is there a large Arab population there? There is a Muslim population here, to be sure. When I was on Mindanao, that's where my wife is from, Mindanao, and there is more of an Arab population there, particularly in the southern part of the island where the problem, what little problem there is, occurs. And very few, some in Manila, but not too many. Do the medical facilities recognize Medicare and Blue Cross medical plans? I don't think so. How does one obtain insurance for medical expenses? Well, they have very inexpensive insurance. And let me tell you a couple stories on this score. Medicine here is superb. The doctors and the nurses here in the Philippines are absolutely superb. They're really, really good. So I hope that answers that. A friend of mine came over here a few months ago and bought, a couple of months ago, and bought some, went and got an eye examination and got glasses, really nice glasses and frames, and the examination and the frames, the whole thing was about $40 US. So it'll give you an idea of the difference. I'll tell you what, before I forget it, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with more. Once again, going on with the letter, or the email, actually, this gentleman wrote with it, which I thought would be many of the same questions that many of you would ask. How did you move furniture up 19 flights in your building? Do they have a freight elevator? Well, yeah, you answered your own question. They do. And when we first moved in here, we slept on the floor for about 3 days. And then we began ordering furniture, which promptly came up I shouldn't say promptly. Everything takes a little time here. Came up the freight elevator. How do you move groceries there? Well, answer to that one is, at first we went out and got taxis, and then I went out and bought a car. I've got a little Mitsubishi Lancer car, and not the guts to drive it anywhere except in a little area called Global City where I live. And, in this area, they've got kind of, they've got very nice streets and sidewalks, and it would remind you of any American city. Do they have American-style supermarkets? Answer to that, yes. Anything you can get in America, you can get here. Or it says, do you have to shop at specialty shops for food, butcher shops, bakeries, and that sort of thing? No. The stores here have virtually every single thing you could ever want to get in America and more. Number 8, what is the cost of domestic help? Now, this is a very interesting one, and will, again, give you an idea of the cost of living here, which I estimate to be 25 to 30% of what it is in America. You can have a live-in maid here for 30 or 40 bucks American a month. So that should give you some idea. What was involved in obtaining a driver's license there? Well, I'll tell you one interesting thing they do here that I think they probably ought to do in the U.S., and that is one of the requirements, aside from being able to drive, is having a U.S. driver's license, which I would assume you would have if you came over here. Secondly, they do a drug test. Everybody who gets a driver's license renewal here has to take a drug test. And I think that's a really good idea. I know in the U.S. we consider it to be an incredible invasion of privacy. But if you saw the way people drive over here, you'd think they were on, well, I shouldn't say that. And he goes on, I understand everybody's... It is pretty crazy. I sent Lex, or the webmaster, a little example of what driving is like in India. I don't know if he had an opportunity to put that up. I haven't looked yet, but if he did, it's a riot. He goes on, I understand everybody speaks English there. Do they speak Spanish? Was, of course, on Corregidor, and we went to visit Corregidor, and man, I'm telling you guys right now that it was an experience that I will never in all my life forget, and I will put some pictures up. I took, I don't know, at least a couple of hundred pictures, I would say, in Corregidor, and yeah, the feeling you had there was of the death that went on, and there were spirits. You could feel the presence of what had gone on the island of Corregidor. It's still, even though there are memorials there, and the guns and the bunkers and the barracks are still all in place. Even that all said, yes, you could feel something very deep and very strong in that area. As you went around the island, there's no power on the island, so it's a daytime tour only. And if you ever get to the Philippines, I would certainly recommend, because after all, it is a part of American history, and they showed the place. There was a statue of General MacArthur, and I Shall Return, and all of that. And Bataan was right across the water. You could look right across and see Bataan, where the death march occurred. So the whole thing was an experience definitely to remember. All right, what I would like to do is take a few calls from the audience. And if you have questions, what I thought I would do is devote this hour to questions about Manila, my move, my current situation. The whole thing, in getting here to the Philippines, I don't know how to explain this to you except to tell you that following the death of my beloved Ramona, it was all like a miracle. It happened so quickly, and of course I have a very good ham radio in a way to thank again for what happened. A very good friend of mine, Carl Richardson, in Arkansas, asked his fiancée to have his fiancee's sister begin to write to me at my private email address, which befuddled me for quite a while. And that's how it all began, sometime after my wife's death. And then we began corresponding, and then it went from there. But I mean, every bit of everything that's happened since, actually prior to my leaving the U.S., quite a bit prior to my leaving the U.S., to this very moment, has been nothing but good luck all the way. And I know that Ramona's hand is guiding me through this. I never have doubted that for 1 second. And I knew right along that if it were not to be, if it should not be, then it would not be. At any rate, here I am on the other side of the world. Can you imagine that? I still amaze at it that we can have communication from one side of the world to the other. I can be talking to you in New York or Los Angeles or London or wherever it is you happen to be, or Toronto or the western part of Canada, all over the world. What a world we live in. Isn't it absolutely amazing? I'm going to attempt now. I took a photograph. I had Aaron take a photograph a little while ago of the kind of current setup that I've got right now, and where I'm sitting and the equipment in front of me and that sort of thing. And I will put that up on the website shortly, maybe, I don't know, in the next hour or so. In the meantime, this hour, I'd kind of like to fill it up with questions from the audience, whatever it is that you would like to ask about my move, my situation, or being here in Manila. Let's give it a try. Now, I can actually answer telephones from here. I can initiate the answering of the phone and the termination of the call. I have Fast Blast, so if you want to ask me a question by Fast Blast, please don't hesitate. I also have that here. The setup here in the condo, by the way, is 802.11g. So in other words, I've got a wireless network in the condo, and I can sort of reach out. Once you're on the internet here, you're connected like anywhere else. You're connected to the world, and I've got a nice 1 megabit cable internet connection here. So I've got just literally every convenience one might have in the U.S. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Let's rock and roll and see what's out there. On the first-time caller line, let's see. Let me try it again here. On the first-time caller line, well, you're not on the air. Yes, you are on the air. Hello.
Hey, Art. How's it going?
It goes well, sir. Where are you?
I'm over in Atlanta, Georgia here. And my name's Robert, and I wanted to find out ask you a question. What's it like over there, and how's everything going?
Well, everything is going great. How is it over there? The weather is hot, Robert. It's typically in the 90s, but so is the humidity. So when you walk outside, Robert, you want to have a shower in about an hour. It's really
You got your
hot.
own personal sauna there.
Now, here's what I've noticed, Robert. The Filipinos who are out walking around on the street in the sun, you will look and you will not see one bead of sweat on their forehead. When I walk out and walk around in the sun, I've got to take a rag with me to wipe it all off, Robert, because it just pours off of me. But I think I'm going to get used to it, and I've noticed that in the last month or so, I'm not sweating as much as I did at first.
Is it a dry heat there? Is that why that they don't sweat, or?
No, Robert. It's it's almost pure water. No, it's almost pure water. No joke. It's really very, very different, buddy. But when you get off the airplane here, I've described this to other people this way, and I'll describe it to you. Even though there are so many things that are familiar here, like the language, and everything is written in English, it's very easy. But when you get off the airplane, every sense that you have is assaulted with difference. It's kind of like walking into a different dimension.
Wow.
Whether or not there really are different dimensions, I don't know. I suspect there are. But when you get off an airplane, buddy, it's just like walking right into a different dimension.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for the call from Atlanta. I very much appreciate it. And we'll try and move on here. And please feel free to call again sometime, okay? Okay, let's see if we can move on here. This would be west of the Rockies, if I can do it correctly here. For some reason it's not. There we go. West of the Rockies, yes. You are on the air. Good evening or morning or something.
Good morning, Mr. Bell. And I want to say, first of all, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here, Medford, KMAD. That's the call sign here.
Oh, Medford, Oregon. That's right.
And you're familiar with that, yes. I wanted to ask, what is the name of your lovely wife's name?
All right. That's an interesting question. Her name is Erin. It's spelled Airyn.
Okay.
Erin. And it's actually, I call her Erin, and even some Filipinos pronounce it Erin. However, her real name is Irene.
Irene.
So it's actually pronounced Irene here.
Pronunciation in the Philippines there.
Well, some, not all.
Well, I just wanted to ask you a question. Like, basically, are you still going to be involved with the extraterrestrials and things that are going on with supernatural?
In other words, am I going to continue doing the same kind of thing that I'm
yes,
doing now?
I wish you would, sir. But you have another location here.
The answer to that is a clear yes. I'm going to do
Very
that.
good. Yes. Well, thank you very much for that. And I enjoy your shows from day to day. And it's like, why don't you come on more often? Does Coast to Coast AM, do they let you do things that are not necessarily, shall we say, politically correct?
Well, of course, yeah, I can do anything I want. Whoever told you anything different?
Well, I just don't know. It's like now that you're over in the Philippines here and you're broadcasting right here, this is a wonderful ham radio opportunity.
It is, and I'm going to be doing that. I thank you very, very much for the
yes,
call.
Sir.
All right, you take care. All right, so there you have it. Yes, of course. Why would I change? Why would I possibly change? The answer to that is I'm not going to change one bit. I will continue to pursue the exact same kind of things that I pursued when I was there in the U.S. My interests haven't changed one bit. The only thing that has changed is my location. And I think it's Rush, isn't it, who frequently says something like, it really doesn't matter where I am as long as I am there. Something like that. Anyway, where I am is the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and many of you may recall, it's not it's not the only time I've been in Southeast Asia. I've been here many times previously, so it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like being home. Anyway, we will continue in the next half hour with questions from the audience. Anything you want to ask is fair game. Anything that I know, that is. There are a lot of things that I don't really know yet about the place where I live, but we'll be finding out. We'll also be experimenting and trying to improve the audio and get things in line. But one thing's for sure, we're going to rock tonight. I'm Art Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM in your nighttime. From Manila, the Philippines. That even sounds a little strange to me. Hey, everybody, I noticed they dug some ABBA out. Now, of course, in the situation I'm in right now, all the music is being picked by the good people back in California at Premier Radio Networks. That will change when I get the ISDN line, but we thought it important to go ahead and get on the air. So here I am, and it's wonderful to be here. There is so much to tell you. I have a lot lined up to talk about, but I'm kind of going to put it on hold, I think, until tomorrow night. I wonder how many of you saw the Hawking statement about humans having to go to space, because he does not think that Earth is going to be around all that long for us to be occupying, so we better have somewhere else to go. At any rate, in a moment, more questions about what's going on here in Manila. Well, all right. This half hour, let's just rock and roll through the calls on the line as best I can. Next hour, we're going to be talking to Russell Targ, who is one of the world's premier remote viewers. And I was just notified that tomorrow night, we were originally scheduled to have Maurice Cotterell on. I really wanted to have him on the air, too, from Ireland. However, I thought, this first weekend back, it might not be the best thing to have me on from Manila in Southeast Asia, have the whole coordination going on from the U.S., and then have somebody on from Ireland. That's right, Ireland, talking about the Holy Grail. And I really, really wanted to talk about that because I just saw a movie very much connected with it over here, by the way, very nice theater. And so I thought it would be very timely, however, perhaps a little problematic because of the delay involved. Anyway, here we go. So it'll be Seth Shostak from SETI tomorrow night, my very good friend Seth Shostak. On the international line, you are on the air. Good something or another. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Is it me now?
It is you. Where are you calling from?
Hi, Art. I hope you still recall when we talked to you. We're from Richmond, British Columbia, and Canada.
Yes.
My name is Nena. Remember when I wanted to talk to Ramona before?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
So you're Filipina, is that correct?
You said
okay.
Targ Air Base. Anyway, me and Tom are really, really happy that you are settled in the Philippines, because, I'm Filipina. I know where you live because, I live in Manila.
You know where Global City is then?
Pardon me?
You know where Global City is?
Oh, yes. It's at the back
Bonifacio.
Yeah, Fort Bonifacio. It's a fantastic place. I'm really, really happy that you put Manila on the map. And
oh, well, listen here now. I'm not going to begin taking credit for that. Manila was on the map a long time before I got here.
Oh, but still, you know why? So many, when we were reading the emails in the website, so many Americans and so many people doesn't know where Manila is. So
I know.
Yeah, it was like, it hurts. But anyway, now I'm really happy. And I learned that Erin is a public school teacher.
She is a public school teacher, that's right, and she had just finished. She had graduated from college and had done student teaching, and I'm going to slaughter this name, Cagayan de Oro City.
Yeah, I know.
On Mindanao, and she was, a public school teacher there, hon. When they finish their student teaching, they probably have to go up into the mountains somewhere and do teaching for 2 or 3 years, and so thank goodness she does not have to do that.
You know why I'm so interested, because I work for the government service insurance system for 21 years, and we have a branch office in Cagayan de Oro, and for sure Aaron's under our branch office in Cagayan de Oro, and I think
All right, look, you call me again. Thank you so very much.
Hang on, can you have 2 minutes talk to my husband Tom? He's really
Of course,
really
yes. Yeah, put him on. Put him on. Sure.
Tom.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, Art. I'm wondering
Hi there.
about ham radio. I know it's on the back burner right now, but eventually, do you think you'll get on 20 meters or 15 or 10 meters or whatever you're thinking about on the rooftop there?
All right. Here's the story. Listen, if you would, please, on the air. Yes, of course, I want to get on here. Right next to me right now is all of my ham gear. I got it all over here in fine shape. And as you all know, or I think you know, I'm on the 19th floor of a condominium. I have one floor between me and the roof. We have very, very nice guards here, very nice Ayala is the company that owns the building. They own a lot of property here in the Philippines, and they're very, very good company. Now, whether or not I can get to the roof is a proposition that I have yet to explore. However, I fully intend to explore it, and if I can get to the roof, I'm going to put a vertical antenna up, rely mainly on 20, 15, and 10 meters. And, of course, we're entering the upside of a sun cycle very shortly now, so it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it, but yes, it's not real high on the priority list in terms of what I have to do, but it's coming up soon, folks. It's definitely coming up soon. All right, let's go to east of the Rockies and say hello there. You're on the air.
Hi, Art. This is Dave in Scranton, Pennsylvania, calling when I wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you, buddy.
I know you've had severe back pain and back problems in the past. And treatment-wise, have you found a doctor to treat you? And with your pain medication, do you have to see a doctor there, or can you get it at the pharmacy without a prescription with you around? Because I know last week when you were on the air with George, you said that some medication you can just get over the counter without a prescription. So
well, yeah, for example, Tamiflu you can get over the counter here, and antibiotics you can get over the counter. I rather suspect anything in the narcotic range, no. But I have a doctor here, and I'm going to be going back to him shortly for my back. My doctor in America gave me about 3 months of medication before I came over here for my back. And
right.
So there you go.
And also, what do you miss? I know you like everything out there, and it's great. You're getting used to it, and you like everything. But is there anything that you miss from here in America? Like I know when you lived here, you were talking about how you used to like a juicy steak. You have like a good steaks out there, and what is food? Why also food like what the food's the same, and what anything you miss from here, and also the food and the steak. Are you able to get your good steaks out there?
All right. Let me answer that off the air. What do I miss? Not very much is the answer. They have McDonald's here. They have most of the fast food chain restaurants. They're all here, all the ones that are in the U.S., except for Taco Bell, of all things. They don't have to. I've not yet seen a Taco Bell. Other than that, I think every single fast food restaurant that you would see in the U.S. is also here in Manila. And then in addition to that, they have this wonderful hamburger place called Jollibee's. Now, I instantly fell in love with Jollibee's. Aaron thinks it's the funniest thing in the whole world, but I crave Jollibee hamburgers. And so, what do I miss? I went into a restaurant with Aaron the other day that promised to serve a big American steak. He happened to mention that. And they brought this steak that was, not exactly a big Texas kind of thick American steak. It was more like a sort of a thin slice of what used to be a thick American steak. So, yeah, there is that. Last time I was in the Far East, we didn't have milk, and I just went nuts over that one. Here we have lots of cow's milk, and whether it be white or chocolate. So none of that is missed. All right. Let's keep moving if we can. Let me go west of the Rockies. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good summer. No, I don't know what it's afternoon here.
All right.
Yes, sir.
You're coming in clear as a bell.
I'm glad it's working.
You know, you can get some good frozen Omaha steaks through the internet in the mail.
That's absolutely true, isn't it?
Yeah, okay.
As a matter of fact, I have an account with Omaha Steaks.
Right. And then I got a friend, he's very familiar with the Philippines and the government there. He said you should go to the biggest Catholic church in the area, make an appointment for 15 minutes a month, make like a $100 contribution to the church. They can smooth out anything. And not only can you go to the roof, you can go to the moon with the Catholic Church behind you in the Philippines.
All right. Well, let me tell you. I guess I might as well take this opportunity, buddy, to tell you and everybody else. Prior to Ramona's passing, there was a new Catholic church opening in Pahrump, where I lived, and we had Ramona, of course, was Catholic, and we had begun to talk about the possibility of my becoming a Catholic. And now, needless to say, here I am in the Philippines, and Erin is not just Catholic, she's really Catholic. And so it was not a decision that I made. See, how can I put this? It was certainly not a decision I made as a result of, just of having married Erin. It really goes back to Ramona. We were about to go to church. Anyway, the bottom line here is the other day I went to my first Catholic Mass, and it was absolutely beautiful, and the odds are pretty good. I would say I'm going to convert and become Catholic. I have not yet talked to the priest in our area about that at our church, but it really looks as though that's the way I'm headed. And that's kind of been in the works now for, I would say, about the last year or so. And then, of course, coming here, where approximately 87% of the country is Catholic, and, of course, my wife is Catholic, so a little bit of pressure there. Even minus pressure, it's something that I want to do, and so I'm going to pursue it. So there you have it. It looks like Art Bell is going to become... All right. Hello, everybody. All right. Now, this is one of the dangers that we... Well, there's two things going on here. One is every now and then the audio may drop, and when that occurs, as it just did, we'll attempt to reconnect. Now, we think one of the reasons this may be going on is because today is Father's Day, of course, and there's enough phone traffic in the U.S. to choke a horse. In fact, probably internationally enough phone traffic to choke a horse. So we'll kind of see how it goes. In the meantime, let's give it a try here, shall we? And just keep going and see what we find on the lines. And hello there on the wild card line. You are on the air.
Hello, Art. It's such a pleasure to speak with you. My name's Michelle, and I'm calling from Concord in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. And it seems like we have so much in common. I'm a technician, ham radio operator. And
congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really fun. I also was in the Air Force as a aeromedical flight tech, and I landed in Clark Air Force Base, which is no longer there, and I loved the Philippines. It's just such a beautiful country, and the people are so nice. But I wanted to ask a question, is that as a single person, if I were to move to the Philippines as you did, as a single woman, would it? Well, what I really want to know, why are you living in a condo as opposed to a home, a house?
Okay. There are a number of very good answers to that question. One is security. Of course, living in a condominium up on the 19th floor is a very secure place to be. We have guards downstairs. It's a very nice area.
Uh-huh.
The other reason, hon, is that I live in the middle of a very high-tech area here. In other words, we needed an area where we could eventually establish what's called an ISDN line. MTV virtually right across the street from me. So there you go. It's a high-tech area. It's a secure area, and those are the reasons that I decided to move here. Okay, does that answer your question? I presume it does. I don't think we have enough time to ask, let anybody else ask a question. So what we'll do is break here. and come back and do actually 3 hours with Russell Targ. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We'll get it together. We're having quite a time of it. I think a lot of it has to do with the traffic going on in the United States. Everybody calling their father. Are you calling Dad? Anyway, we're about to delve into the world of remote viewing. It's a fascinating world. As I think you all know, the power of the mind is, I think, the most fascinating frontier that we all have in front of us. The power of the mind is perhaps, I know this is a strong, outrageous statement, but I think the power of the mind may turn out to be the most powerful force in the universe. You think that's too strong a statement? I don't. Russell Targ is a physicist and an author who was a pioneer in the development of the laser. That's right, the laser, and co-founder of the previously secret Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 1970s and 1980s. He did graduate work in physics at Columbia University, and he is co-author of 7 books dealing with the scientific investigation of psychic abilities and transformation of consciousness. Most recently, The End of Suffering. That's his new book, and that also is a very optimistic book title, I'd say, The End of Suffering, A Guide to Fearless Living. Targ retired from Lockheed Martin Missiles and Space Company as a senior staff scientist. So this is quite a switch for him, where he developed airborne laser systems. Good Lord. He now pursues ESP research in Palo Alto. That's really quite a change, isn't it? Palo Alto, California, and publishes special editions of classic books in psychic research. So I guess I would say welcome to my guest, Russell Targ. Russell, welcome to the program.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be with you, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much, Russell, from all the way in the Philippines. It's great to have you back on The End of Suffering. Russell, tell me about that. The End of Suffering. How did you pick that title and why?
Well, I could have called this book Why Bother with ESP. As you mentioned, I'd written 6 other books about how to get in touch with a part of yourself that's psychic. And it began to be clear to me that everyone now knows how to get in touch with their remote viewing, their psychic abilities. And the question is, why do that? And in this book, I try and encourage people to move from their day-to-day meat and potatoes activity and move into the spaciousness that's available to them, so they can participate in what you were describing, experience their mind as the most powerful element in the universe. And after you get in touch with your psychic ability and move into this peaceful, loving space, you catch on to the fact that you couldn't just be a physical body. It's the idea
Russell,
that if you look in the mirror...
I'm sorry. Do you agree with that statement? I mean, what I said was kind of outrageous in a way, but we're going to do a break here in a second. I've come to the realization that, Russell, that really our minds may someday prove to be the most powerful force in the universe. Do you think that's possible?
I think that's correct.
You think that's correct? All right, I'll tell you what.
Talk about that later. I think you're on the right track.
All right, hold it right there. We're going to do our break. We'll come right, the most powerful force in the universe. We'll be right back. Once again, Russell Targ. Russell, welcome back. I just sort of wanted to establish that in the beginning, whether you really thought that it's possible that our minds may turn out to be the most powerful force in the universe. That's something to think about. Russell?
Allow us to move into time when we quiet our minds.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, the thing that most excites me at the moment is that we've been able to organize a conference on retrocausality, how the future affects the past, or how you're able to know the future. And this is going to be sponsored by the American Association for the Advancement of Science at San Diego University next week. So there'll be scientists, mainly physicists from all over the world, investigating how you're able to move your consciousness into the future. And I think that it'll show a lot of light on the extent to which we don't understand time at all. But I have
All right, so
no
you're convinced then that we can move our consciousness into the future?
I am absolutely convinced. We have a lot of data from our work with the government where we were asked to forecast what the Russians or what the Chinese would do a few days in the future. And I'm familiar with it from my own work where we're forecasting changes in the silver commodity market, and we did that quite successfully, as a number of people are doing right now. So there's no doubt that not only can the future be known, it is known, and we have the opportunity to expand our awareness to participate in that.
Are there any paradox problems with regard to the future? I know a lot of people talk about paradoxes with respect to travel into the past or time travel into the past. Why would there not be paradox problems involved in the future? In other words, if you know silver is going to go and you in some way take advantage of it, for example, and make a lot of money, any problems involved in that?
Well, there's no problem in the silver market. We were able to do that. In fact, we were so successful, Nova made a film about us called The Case of ESP. And then a few years ago, I was able to repeat our silver forecasting where we were successful 11 out of 12 times forecasting the direction of future of the market. So there's no doubt that a person who has learned remote viewing can quiet his mind and forecast the future. The paradoxes come from the fact that you might have a precognitive dream, and something occurs in the dream that frightens you or that you don't want to experience, and it appears that you don't have to experience that. It's as though you're able to move off the timeline, move off of our ordinary experience of space-time, make use of that information, and move on to another plane. For example, when we were working for the CIA, we had a contract monitor who was very familiar with our work. And one day he was in Detroit with a buddy doing his ordinary CIA business, and we're in California, of course. And in the course of his stay there, he had a very frightening dream of it being in an airplane crash, a terrible fiery crash. And this, of course, is a guy who has flown thousands of times. There's no fear of flying. But this was so realistic that he decided to change his plans. But rather than seem like a coward, he just told his buddy, I have something else to do for a day in Detroit. He drove his friend to the airport, put him on the plane, and got to see the crash as he drove away.
Oh, my God.
So he was able to make use of his psychic information of seeing the airplane.
Yeah, he saved his own life, but what about his friend? I mean, if it was that strong, why did he put his friend on the airplane?
Well, nobody wants to be teased for being psychic, and certainly not a CIA agent. So this would be a case where he had the dream about the airplane crash, and I would say that the opportunity to see the crash fulfilled his dream entirely. It didn't fulfill his dream about being in the crash, but from my experience, I would say that when people have a dream like that, they will often dramatize it by putting themselves in it. So
okay.
the paradox.
All right, but really, Russell, doesn't that imply that you can change the future? In other words, if you know the future and you were in that airplane and in fact it did crash but did not crash with you, then you've altered the future.
That's what it appears. It looks as though you're forecasting the probable future rather than the actual future. And I've done experiments of that type where what it appears is a complicated experiment where people were asked to forecast what they're going to be shown the next day. And there were some targets that were very, very probable and others that were less probable. And the existence of the probable target did not interfere with them seeing the one they were actually shown. So we're very, very confident. We don't understand, of course, how your awareness is able to move into the future. I don't claim to have a proven theory of precognition, although I have good intuitions about how it works. But I have no doubt at all that we can know the future. There's huge evidence for that.
I take it, Russell, that moving into the past is equally, you can do it with equal ease, moving into the future, the past, or the present. Does it matter?
Well, the psychic archaeologists move into the past. Stephen Schwartz has written a couple of books on psychic archaeology, like The Secret Vaults of Time, where he describes how he and others were able to go to a desert site and with a psychic, Hella Hammond or George McMillan, describe what was going on at a buried temple, what they were doing there, and then unearth the things and dig in a place where no one knew what was happening. So you can use your remote viewing to find hidden things and also use your awareness to freely move back and forth in time. And the evidence for this is really overwhelming, and this is why we call psychic abilities or remote viewing a non-local ability. So we've become very coherent with modern physics with the idea that it's no harder to look into the far distance than it is to look across the street. And similarly, we are confident that it's no harder to describe what's going to be on tomorrow's newspaper than it is to describe the object I've got on my desk. So our awareness moves in space-time.
All right, but I've heard from many psychics, of course Ed Dames and others, I might add, that trying to identify when a specific thing is going to happen. You mentioned an airplane crash, for example. Well, that could have been tomorrow, or it could have been next year, or it could have been 10 years later. So how does one come up with the specific timeline? I've understood that's a real problem.
That's a good question, and that's correct. If you ask me, when is something going to happen, there are no signposts, there are no mileposts on the timeline. So it's very hard to say when something is going to happen. On the other hand, if you have a dream showing that something did happen or will happen, then you can make use of that information. It may not happen tomorrow. It may happen a couple of days later. But in general, if you have a precognitive dream, it pertains to what's going to happen in the near future. And we teach people how to recognize which dreams are precognitive, because one of the things you have to do is learn to separate your ordinary anxiety, wish fulfillment dreams from dreams that have this unusual clarity or bizarre elements.
All right. Well, that in itself is a really good question, Russell. How do you do that? I've had a couple of very immediate precognitive experiences, one in particular, but I've also had a lot of dreams, and I have no way of knowing whether they're immediately precognitive or whether they're just random firings of neurons in sleep. I have no way of knowing. How do you do that?
Well, if a dream pertains to something you're worried about anyway, for example, if you're a student and you're worried about failing an examination that you haven't studied for, we would not consider that a precognitive dream. But if you have a dream about an elephant walking across your front lawn, and there are no elephants, let's say you're in suburban Kansas, and you have this dream about an elephant crossing your front lawn, and it's very vivid. The fact that it's so bizarre and so unusual and so vivid, that would be a good one to tell your wife or tell your partner about, that I had this unusual dream, because it's the very unusual ones that are the ones that are most likely to occur the next day.
All right.
And the game I play is that you don't get credit for precognition unless you've told someone about it.
All right. Well, the one that I had, Russell, was overpowering. It was something that I absolutely could not ignore. In fact, I actually tried to ignore it, and it came washing over me like so many ocean waves, just pounding on me. It was so strong, and it was while I was wide awake. It was not while I was asleep. Now, have you heard of that before?
The opportunity to experience something washing over you is an indication that it really is a precognitive dream. The more extensive interaction you have. It's like an out-of-body experience. In remote viewing, there's a kind of continuum from our nice, simple, sanitary remote viewing that we would do in the laboratory, where I'd ask someone to tell me what you see on your mental screen. And then there's a continuum to going into the distance and interacting with another person, where you can bring with you the emotionality or sensitivity or sexuality and have a very profound experience at a distant place. And the more involving your dream is, the more likely it is to actually be precognitive. I want to mention, in The End of Suffering, I have a chapter on learning how to discern which dreams are ordinary wish fulfillment dreams and which one really carries information about the future.
All right. Russell, I want to ask you a question, and hopefully get a good, honest answer from you. And I know it's tough because remote viewers, I suppose, are somewhat, I don't know, competitive, and I guess that's a natural thing. But Ed Dames claims that he has developed a method for, identifying the physical location, the exact by coordinate physical location of an event or an item, and B, he claims that he has now come up with some method of identifying specifically when something is going to occur. Are you at all familiar with these claims? Do you have any comment on them?
Well, I have comments on a lot of that. I've been following Ed Danes' work for many, many years, and especially on your show and elsewhere, and he's made lots and lots of claims about where things are and when things are going to happen, and he says that he's 100% correct, and to the best of my knowledge, he has never forecast or described anything that was actually correct. So I encounter his students who are in fact pretty good remote viewers, because remote viewing is very easy to teach, but I have no reason to believe his claims, because his claims have never been put to the test in the past. Now, with regard to finding things by coordinate remote viewing, now that was our bread and butter activity for 3 decades at SRI. So there's no doubt that if you give somebody geographical coordinates, then they can describe what's going on there. I mean, one of Joe McMoneagle is probably the outstanding remote viewer in the world today. When he was working with us, the government gave him coordinates of a building in the Soviet Union. And he looked at that and drew pictures, which I have, where he showed them building an absolutely enormous submarine, a submarine 500 feet long, and everyone thought that was ridiculous. First of all, nobody's ever seen a sub that big, and it was a quarter mile from the ocean.
Right.
But that turned out to be a 1 year in advance U.S. information brought psychically about the Typhoon-class submarine. And that's one of the great accomplishments of our program and one of the great things that Joe McMoneagle did. All he had to work with is the geographical coordinates, and he was able to identify the building, draw the building, and then draw this stupendously large, the sub 3 times bigger than anything that was ever seen, and there it was a year later showing up on satellite photography.
Wow. Is there any impediment to remote viewing at all? In other words, if you were to take somebody and put them in a solid lead room, something shielded entirely from what we understand to be the nature of electromagnetic waves, would it stop? Could you bar it? Could you stop it? What I'm looking for is a source of energy. What is the source of the energy? There's got to be some kind of transmission, right?
Well, the easy part of that question is that people love working in electromagnetic shielding. We did all of our work at SRI in a electromagnetic shielded room because people did better and liked being in the room because it shields out the electromagnetic noise from the terrestrial noise and the solar noise. And the reason that they could do that is because there's really no separation in consciousness. Though I think that it is not energetic, I think you can see the distance because there's really no separation.
All right. All right, Russell, we're at a break point here, so I'll tell you what, buddy. Hold on for a moment. We'll be right back. Remote viewing is what we're talking about. Russell Targ is my guest. Stay right where you are. Once again, from Manila in the Philippines, good afternoon, everybody. I know it's the great night across all of America, really. God, it's a weird feeling. It's about 2:36 or so in the afternoon here, and my guest is a fascinating man whose name is Russell Targ. We're talking about remote viewing, the power of the mind, and I am convinced the power of the mind is the next frontier. More in a moment. Once again, Russell Targ, his book, of course, his newest book is called The End of Suffering. That's a very, very, very interesting title, I think, Russell. Is it really possible that we could end suffering? That's quite a claim.
It certainly is, and you had a good question at the top of the hour. Why did I happen to write this book? And after I left SRI and the ESP program, I went back to my roots, which was laser work at Lockheed. And as a reasonably young engineer, I was very alarmed to see that people were dying very shortly after retiring from Lockheed. And each week I would get the Lockheed newspaper and observe many, many men who had retired at 65 would then die within the next 2 years, 67, 68 years old, which wasn't that far away from me. So I got 100 of the newspapers and quickly calculated that people were dying prematurely at odds better than 100 to 1. That is, a 65-year-old man who retired from Lockheed after years of service would be expected to live until 80 because he had avoided being shot by his friends in a hunting accident. He's not going to crash his motorcycle. He's not going to die in a war. He should have another 15 years of life ahead of him. And I was very concerned that these people were dying enormously prematurely. And I learned the same thing was happening at Boeing. In fact, Boeing and Lockheed and other aerospace companies had such a premature death rate that they were thinking about underfunding their pension plans because no one was living to collect them. So and one of my good friends died within a week of retiring. He said he wanted to smell the flowers, retired at 65 and was dead the following week. And what became clear to me is that people, Army officers and long-term engineers, love their company and are very proud to have a business card that says Lockheed Engineer. And then you get to be 65 and they tear up your card, send you home to annoy your wife where there's nothing in your in-basket, and suddenly you're nothing. So the suffering and the premature death comes from the fact that you spend your life defending the story of who you think you are, and then that's suddenly taken away and you're nothing.
Well, that makes all the sense in the world to me. In addition, Russell, you might extend that because I know it's true that frequently when, and believe me, I worried about this, when my wife passed away, I began sort of a downward spiral, a very, very fast downward spiral, Russell, and I have a feeling that if I'd kept going in that direction, I probably wouldn't be here right now. In fact, it's a very strong feeling. And I wonder if it's a similar kind of thing.
It's absolutely similar. There have been there's a lot of data for things like cancer and multiple sclerosis, which are often autoimmune diseases, that if you lose a beloved partner or lose your job, and frequently both of those occur, you're extremely likely to get sick or get one of these fatal illnesses because you're, in the case of losing a job, you lose your identity. So one of the things that I really emphasize in The End of Suffering is to discover who you are as separate from what you do.
Now, is this something
may I
you
invite
can do?
people to look at my website where I have a lot of the data on this and remote viewing data. So my website is espresearch.com.
All right. Is this something that you can do, Russell, prior to, for example, retiring, prior to losing your partner, or is it something you can do when that happens?
You better do it prior to that, because when you lose your job or lose your partner, you're really in shock. That is, my wife died a number of years ago, and I was very depressed about that. And I was also changing work. I was moving from psychic stuff to the laser work, so I was in great transition. So I'm very fortunate to marry my new wife, Patricia, and I'm quite happy resuming the remote viewing, and she inspired me to write the End of Suffering book. But it's important to have resources. That is, I quit Lockheed after a dozen years, but I was passionate about understanding psychic abilities and communicating and teaching people how to do that. So I had lots to do even after I left aerospace. But we encourage people to, first of all, find a way to quiet their mind. It's absolutely critical that you get involved in some process that allows you to do what the Buddhists call mindfulness, which is going into transcendent knowing, and we can talk about that later, but getting an idea that who you are is not what you see in the mirror in the morning. And then,
all right. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't do this prior, Russell, to an event taking place like retirement or losing a partner, particularly because you have no way of knowing usually when that's going to occur. At least I certainly didn't. So for those who don't have that advance warning, how can they begin immediately the process of recovery? And I mean real recovery, not just sort of still living, but really looking forward to life ahead and all the things that are going to keep you alive. How do you do that?
Well, the first step is mindfulness, finding a way to quiet your mind, stop the chatter, and moving into this spacious place where you give up living a life that's ego-centered, self-centered, and self-pitying, and move into the spaciousness where you feel generous and joyful. And it's critical to catch on to the idea there's more to you than just a physical body. So the idea of getting control of your ongoing chatter is very important. Another idea is to notice that nothing is really happening to you except to the extent that you give it meaning. That as the Buddhists annoyingly say that nothing is happening, and what they mean is that nothing is happening except that you give it meaning and it has meaning for you, is an invitation to move from conditioned awareness, where you're focused on yourself, into a realm where you are spacious and helpful to other people. So it gives meaning to your...
Let me ask this, if I might. You've mentioned now Buddhism several times and the quieting of the mind. Is there anything within Buddhism itself, Russell, that that you identify with or you think is more correct than, for example, Christianity, or is it simply the discipline of the mind that the Buddhist practice that you feel is useful in everything we're talking about right now?
People will differ on this. My opinion, as Karen Armstrong described Buddhism as a religion, and she's a great expert in religions, of course, I disagree. I think that Buddhism is a way of understanding who you are, and it does not require you to believe anything at all. The teaching in Buddhism is like a discipline, like a laboratory experiment. I can tell you to do this and become part of a spiritual support group and live your life in a way that you're not cut off for people, but have spiritual support and move into the spaciousness. I'm not asking you to believe anything, but it's like a chemistry experiment where I say, if you will do this and then do that, come back to me in 6 weeks and let me know what you're experiencing. Are you feeling better? So I think that Buddhism is very, very helpful. They have a 2,500-year-old technology that tells people how to quiet their mind. If you look at the Dalai Lama, for example, almost everything that is said to him by a serious interviewer makes him laugh because he recognizes that the interviewer really so misunderstands his own self and the world that the Dalai Lama hardly knows where to start answering the question.
Yeah, very interesting. So, again, recapping, there's nothing necessarily about Buddhism itself that you must believe or you must practice or you must not necessarily become a Buddhist, but their practice of quieting the mind, their practice of self-knowing is of value.
There certainly is a difference between Buddhism and the worldwide Judeo-Christian view. Buddhism teaches that the divine or the spaciousness is within you. In the Judeo-Christian teaching, you tend to feel that God is omniscient and omnipresent and in heaven, and you're puny and small and down here, and your goal is to climb from down here to up there. It's a dualistic view where you, the priest or the rabbi or some other intermediary will help you get from your meat and potato state to the divine state. The Buddhist argues that not only are you divine, the flow of loving awareness that's within you is who you are. You don't have to go to some other place. You already are a divine being, and you can experience that.
Okay, so there really is, with respect to remote viewing, there is no specific religion that adds anything other than the kind of training of the mind that the Buddhists do. Is that fair?
That's right. I want to be clear. I'm not saying something silly. I'm not saying that remote viewing is a spiritual path. The thing that remote viewing did for me, it's as though I had 10 years of spiritual training from the CIA. I get to sit in the dark for a decade helping other people get in touch with the part of themselves that's psychic. And what became crystal clear to me is that I could reside in this spacious, loving state rather than the hurly-burly state I experienced on my motorcycle.
Mm-hmm. All right, you made a comment about Ed Dames, to your knowledge, not be. Okay, Russell, once again, sorry for the interruption. You made claims about Ed Dames not necessarily being correct. I'm wondering, Russell, what kind of claims you could make about the U.S. government program itself and its success rates. How successful was it? Because after all, it was ended.
Well, there are a number of ways you can measure the success. The easiest one to say is that it's very hard to get money from the government, as any listener would know. And we were supported for 23 years by some of the most hard-nosed people in the government, the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, Army Intelligence, Air Force Intelligence. And we were given $2 or $3 million a year to do more or less the same kind of thing. So that year after year, we would provide information that was useful operational information to these government agencies. And the way you can tell that we were doing something useful is that year after year they kept giving us money to continue giving them information. And after a few years, they set up a similar program, or we helped them set up a similar program in Fort Meade, where you had dozens of Army intelligence people learning to do remote viewing based on our training quite a number of other people. And I'm happy to tell you about finding submarines and bomb tests and so forth. But one of the interesting things that your listeners might like to know is there are more than 1 million Google sites dealing with remote viewing now because remote viewing is very easy to learn. So when you ask me about Ed Danes, I'm confident that he can teach people how to do remote viewing because anyone who's experienced in remote viewing can teach it. Their main function of a remote viewing teacher is to give people permission to make use of an ability he already has.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the people who come to Ed want want to be able to do this. They really want to be able to remote view. So it's kind of like a hypnosis subject. If somebody volunteers to be hypnotized, why? They've got a far better chance than somebody who says, look, you can't hypnotize me, nor do I want to be hypnotized. That subject is not going to be hypnotized for the most part, right?
That's right. And I've recently been involved for the past year helping somebody do financial forecasting. And in the course of that, I ran across many people who had Danes were taught how to do remote viewing. And his students do as well as Dave Morehouse or Paul Smith or Skip Atwater. There are quite a number of people from the Army program, including myself, who's teaching remote viewing. And students of all of us do quite well, because what we're doing is showing people the moves, giving them permission to do it, and then telling them what interferes with psychic ability. And most people are able to do remote viewing surprisingly well. And that's how we were able to support ourselves for all those years.
Yeah, okay. What about this? What about the other side of remote viewing? The one we only sort of touched on at the beginning of the show, and that's when I said it may turn out to be the most powerful force in the universe. You know, I did these series of experiments. We've talked about it before. They shocked me. They surprised me. They even scared me a little bit. Let's talk for a second about remote influencing. Now, that would be the ability to cause somebody to either believe something or to do something from a remote location. Is there anything to that presently? Is it being researched? Is it going to be possible or not?
It is being researched, because the most interesting part of remote influencing is the ability to do distant healing. And there's now very strong evidence, largely initiated by my daughter, Elizabeth Targ, who's a psychiatrist, who showed that people from all over the country could pray for her AIDS patients. She had 60 AIDS patients. 3 of them were receiving prayers or good wishes or ministrations from healers or energy healers or spiritual healers from all over the country, and 30 of them received no such prayers. And it turned out the 30 men who were everyone's very sick, but the 30 men in the prayed for group had much better outcomes, fewer opportunistic illnesses, fewer trips to the hospital, better self-report, and so forth. And this was published in the Western Medical Journal, and similar work has now been done successfully, funded by the National Institutes of Health.
All right, but there is also similar work going on, is there not, with regard to simple prayer? In other words, people praying as they would normally pray in church for people who have an illness in the hospital, that sort of thing, with very similar and positive results, correct?
Yes, they are. But it works better if you have experienced people praying for you. Then so-called congregational prayer is not so successful. If you have a whole church full of people asked to pray for a whole group of people that they don't know, that is much less efficacious than having individual experienced men and women praying for people whose picture they have where they can focus their attention. That works very well, and there's a lot of data on that that's been published on the efficacy of distant healing.
Okay, Russell, if you can distantly heal somebody, can you distantly hurt somebody?
You can certainly affect the thoughts that a person has at a distance. For example, if I quiet your mind, if I quiet my mind, I can send you a picture. So if I can send you a picture that would frighten you, you might be frightened. If I can send you a picture that makes you happy and feel loving, I can do that as well. So there's no doubt that the thoughts of one person can affect the thoughts of a distant person, for better or for ill.
It is indeed. From Manila in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, I'm Art Bell. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My guest is Russell Targ, and he's written a book called The End of Suffering. And actually, you know, as it was sent to me, it says The End of Suffering, ? Russell says we really can actually end suffering. End suffering. Can you imagine that? End all suffering through, through remote viewing. We'll find out more in a moment. We'll be right back. Once again, I'm Art Bell from Manila in the Philippines, Southeast Asia. My guest is Russell Targ, and we're talking about the end of suffering. There is a question mark there, and I'm particularly interested in this. Now, I've interviewed, Russell, a lot of scientists. I've interviewed a lot of physicists, a lot of high-powered folks, and it's been my general, doctors, people like that, it's been my general impression, Russell, that when I ask them and really press them up against the wall about whether or not they believe in God, they don't. So I guess I'll impose that question upon you. Do you believe in God, life after death, the way it's described in the Bible, all the rest of that?
Well, that's a multi-part question. I think that it's foolish for a person to say they don't believe in God, where we know that God is an experience that takes place in consciousness. If someone says, when I quiet my mind, God comes to me, fills me with love, and gives me the experiences of the divine, I would be stupid to tell them they're not having that experience. So I think that as a scientist, I have to agree that if somebody says that they are experiencing the divine presence, that their life is filled with this flow of loving awareness, that they experience God personally, I have to believe that they experience that because it's something that occurs to them.
Well, but as a scientist, why do you have to believe that? In other words,
people are telling me they're having the experience, and that experience. In fact, Pierce once wrote a paper. C.S. Pierce wrote a paper called "The Neglected Proof for the Existence of God," and his argument is that for thousands of years, intelligent people, including mystics and scientists and others, have the experience of God, and they all describe they have the same experience. And he felt that this commonality among all countries, all people, and all times, that people have the experience of the divine, makes it obvious that something like that is going on.
All right.
Does that make sense?
All right. It does. It's in my opinion, it's not absolute proof. It's not absolute proof.
Well, what it proves is that a lot of people have this experience of transcendence, and we feel that these people appear to be onto something. With regard to survival after death, I think the evidence for that is becoming very strong. There are two sources of information that make me pretty confident that some aspect of ourselves survive. Part of that is the work with mediums from the previous century, where people like F.W. Myers would write about experiments he did with mediums.
Right.
Well, one that I write about that I'm very familiar with from his book, Human Personality, where he sent his servant with the name of a person in an envelope and went to the medium, who was Mrs. Verrill in London. This is 1900 or so. And the servant said, "My master would like you to contact the person in the envelope." And she said, "Oh, yes, I see him. He tells me to remind Myers of dinner they had in Paris and the view, and he remembers that Myers was very fond of a walking stick that that the guy had, that had a knife blade concealed in it." And the spirit said to the medium, "I don't need that anymore, but if you tell Myers to go to my mother's house, it's in the back of the closet." And that was the end. So that sounded to me like a long-distance phone call from the dead. Myers went to the person's mother's house. The cane was in the closet, and she gave it to him. So this is a case where the medium couldn't have known all this information. She didn't know who the person Myers was looking for, and she was able to enact and replicate the behavior and mode of speaking of Myers' deceased friend. So the evidence.
what about electronic voice phenomena? I've done an awful lot of work, and I've looked at some people's work in this area, Russell, and it's incredible. It really is incredible. I wonder if you've looked at it at all and what your impression is.
I've looked at it just a bit, and I'm not an expert in that, so I really don't want to. I know there are a lot of people passionate about it. The data that I have seen has not been good, and in writing to the people who are doing it, they say, oh, yes, you haven't seen the good data, you should see our data. But the survival experiment that I'm really excited over is one that two German psychologists have just published in the British Society for Psychical Research. So get this, these two psychologists are chess players, so they wanted their medium to find a deceased, strong chess player to play chess against a living, strong chess player.
Wow.
So the medium did find a deceased Hungarian player who died in 1950, and being Hungarian, I've forgotten it. It's a complex name. I've forgotten his name. But through the medium, this deceased grandmaster played a lengthy game with Viktor Korchnoi, who I do know is a Russian grandmaster who was a contender for the world championship. And Korchnoi, the living grandmaster, played a game lasting several years and 60 moves against the deceased Hungarian. And in the middle of the game, Korchnoi said, I don't know who's going to win. This game is so complex, it's hard to tell. And the guy he was playing against through the medium was famous for playing very complex games. In the end,
what was the medium famous for? Was the medium a chess player?
Was famous for helping people in Germany talk to their dead friends. Medium was a lady who wasn't a chess player at all.
Oh, okay.
So we sent, my brother-in-law is Bobby Fischer, the world champion. So we sent all these moves to Fischer in Iceland, and he had to agree that anybody who could go 60 moves with Korchnoi had to be playing at grandmaster level chess.
Wait a minute. Your brother-in-law's Bobby Fischer?
Yes.
Really? Now, there's a fact I didn't know. My God. Well, that's fascinating. That is some proof.
That's the brother of my former wife who's deceased.
Right.
Bobby is alive and living in Iceland.
Right, I had heard that. That's absolutely amazing, and I guess that is a kind of a proof. And to be honest with you, I too believe in life after death. But Russell, I'm a pretty hard-bit guy. I mean, I want to put my hand on it. I want to be able to prove something. That's going at least part of the way. There's no question about that.
The thing that's strong about this is that this shows that a medium can give you not only information, but can communicate an ability. That is, a medium who is given information still couldn't play grandmaster level chess unless she was in touch with that information. It's not like where's the... See, if she was super psychic, she might have found the knife cane for Myers, clairvoyantly scanning the world. But there's no place for her to go other than the mind of a grandmaster to be able to play chess like a grandmaster. So I find that really one of the very most strong. That if I had any doubts, which I really didn't from reading Myers, but if I had any doubts, this experiment would have convinced me that some aspect does survive.
All right, but it also implies consciousness, right? In other words, full consciousness would be required to put together a chess game. There's no question about it.
Because they asked him all kinds of complicated questions about how come he lost in Mar del Plata, and he gave information about his girlfriend that interfered with his chess game, all sorts of personal information that had to be verified through complicated research. So I found it a very convincing story, of which there are quite a number, as you know.
There are also stories, Russell, about people providing modulation techniques. In other words, multiple tones with which the dead can actually modulate a voice. I don't know if you're familiar with that work or not, but I find it absolutely...
this electronic voice phenomena and people often, occasionally will get so-called phone calls from the dead, where you pick up the telephone and you have a message on your answering machine from somebody who's deceased. And Scott Rogo actually wrote a book called Phone Calls from the Dead, or I guess a chapter in his book on survival. So that phenomena is pretty, many people have had that experience. And what it shows is that we don't understand the nature of who we are, and we also don't know the nature of time, because these deceased people give all the impressions of continuing to exist at another level or in another dimension. But if you can play chess with somebody, that shows a high degree of continued existence somewhere.
Okay. All right. Well, you're absolutely right. It certainly is convincing. What about out-of-body experiences? I've interviewed any number of people about OBEs, and is there a relationship to what's done in remote viewing? Is OBE sort of a step along the way, or does it utilize the same, I don't know, realm, I guess would be the right way to put it?
In the out-of-body experience, you just bring more of your sensitivity and emotionality and sexuality and whatever you're comfortable with to the remote viewing experience. At SRI, we did not want anybody to have a bad trip. For example, we didn't want to have somebody go out of their body and then complain to the management that those physicists separated my consciousness from my body and I can't get myself back together. We didn't want to have that experience. So we just ask people to do simple things like quiet your mind and describe what you see on your mental screen, which is something that almost everyone can do. In the out-of-body experience, I've had an out-of-body experience using the Monroe Institute technology,
right,
where they put you in the box and let you listen to hemisync music and noise in your ears, and that allows you to dissociate. And as an experienced remote viewer, I can describe things in the distance pretty well. But in this case, I really had a quite involving experience where I was able to go and visit somebody, describe what she was doing, what she looked like, what she had on, that she was dressed and ready to leave the house. And I had full what we call mobility at the target. That is, things looked crystal clear to me. I was able to move around and then confirm what I saw was seen genuinely. So an out-of-body experience is like a more involved is like a more personally involving remote viewing experience.
Right, but the question was, is it in the same realm? In other words, are you using the same? You know, it's this thing when you try to talk about it, you almost fail. Words fail you. But
yes, it's along the same continuum. If I'm interviewing, we once did an experiment where I was interviewing Hella Hamid, a great remote viewer and dear friend of mine. And our task was to describe the Kremlin office of Brezhnev. And we spent a couple hours doing that one afternoon. And I'm function as a psychic travel agent where I'm more or less conscious, operating a tape recorder and guiding her what to do. And her job is to just describe her mental pictures. And we would, all we were told is visit his Kremlin office. And we went into the office, and she described the office door, which is leather-covered with carpet tacks holding the leather in place. And we went inside, described his desk, and then went down a secret passage into a lower floor. And she said it was dark, and I said, well, I'll turn on the lights and make it light. So we basically had a promenade through the Kremlin, through Brezhnev's office. The bottom line is I left SRI a few years later and got to see his office, and she exactly described it correctly. And we just had a mental trip. I would say, do this, and she would describe it. And then I would say, do that, and then she would describe that. So it's as though we traveled together through space and time to do this task. And it's as though we shared that experience and we're in every way there, feeling the door, looking at the studs, walking inside, going downstairs. So what started as a ordinary remote viewing, close your eyes, tell me what you see, was really evolved into a very personally engaging experience. And in workshops, I show people how to do that. I just lead them along that continuum. So I would say
if all of this is so, Russell, then why would it not be true, or is it true, that in remote viewing sessions, the dead are encountered? I think of death, in fact, maybe that's a good question. Is death itself a non-local experience, environment? And if so, then why would you not be bumping into those who had already passed in remote viewing sessions, or is it possible?
You come up with very tough questions. In my experience, our remote viewing has always been very focused. The short answer is we have not run into deceased people.
Okay.
I once had a out-of-body experience where I ran into some strange things that we can talk about. But in general, people doing remote viewing are focused on a particular task. And generally, deceased people don't, in my experience, deceased people don't drift into other people's activity. Along with that, let me again give my website, because somebody did write and ask me a good question. So my website is espresearch.com, and if you write to me, then I can probably answer your question on the air. And somebody did write to me and wants to know, basically, does remote viewing make you crazy? They wanted to know, does remote viewing open you to attack from other people? And the answer to that is no. Remote viewing, on the contrary, gives you the tools to recognize what are your own thoughts and what come from another place. Because the cardinal idea in remote viewing is to learn to separate the psychic signal, which pertains to your intentionality, what you're looking for, separate that from the mental noise, which is memory, imagination, analysis, and anything else that comes streaming in. So remote viewing is really remote viewing is an intellectual activity that gives you tools that promote mental health.
All right. Let me ask this. If the dead or those who have passed do not drift into a remote viewing session, is it possible that if a remote viewer specifically wanted to look at that realm or find somebody who had passed, that it could be done? Or is this something you have simply not considered yet?
Well, certainly a lot of people function as mediums, that is, quiet their minds and have the experience of a deceased person, and we generally call them mediums. The remote viewing can do a lot of things, but it probably doesn't do everything. The remote viewing generally deals with the ordinary so-called real-world space, can look into the distance and can look into the future, but in general, a person doing remote viewing isn't asked to communicate with a deceased person. We have the ability to do that, but it's generally not part of what we think of as remote viewing.
Okay, well, that was the question, whether you actually had the ability to do it, and apparently you do. Listen, hold tight, Russell. We're at a break point, so stand by, and we'll be right back to you. From the, I almost said high desert, but it's not, is it? It's Southeast Asia, the capital city of the Philippines, Manila. I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Coast AM. Yes, indeed, from Manila, the Philippines. Here I am. Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, it's the middle of the night back there, isn't it? I've got Russell Targ on the line. He's a remote viewer. And we're talking about, we've kind of drifted into an interesting area, and that's life after death, and whether or not there's any connection with remote viewing. I'm very, very curious about that. As you know, I'm very curious about the entire subject of life after death. So more of this and much more in a moment. All right. Back again from Manila, the Philippines. Everybody bear with us a little bit on the technical side of things here. We're trying to get things straightened out using different phone companies and doing some experiments. So bear with it. It's a little rough. There's no question about it. Russell Targ is my guest, and he's written a book, a brand new book called The End of Suffering. I hope that it's true. I've certainly been through it myself, and I can tell you that everything he said at the onset of the program about people retiring and then passing away quite quickly or passing away after losing a partner, all of that is absolutely dead on true. Russell, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much. And what's really true is that the part that remote viewing plays in this is it lets you know who you are, that you're not just a physical body. Because some of our favorite people never learned that. We, for example, Marilyn Monroe, who everyone loved, and Elvis Presley, the King, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison of the Doors, Janis Joplin, the great blues singer, all had great success, multiple platinum records. Marilyn Monroe just had a new contract with Fox, and then they all killed themselves or died from an overdose, which they took to relieve the pain. So you wonder, how could these people who had the elements that Aristotle talked about, they had happiness, fame, wealth, health, beauty, and then they killed themselves. And my answer is that these people had very little idea who they were. It's as though their identity or their self was sucked out of their body by their fans. So they tried to appeal to their fans.
Yeah, I noticed,
Arthur Miller wrote about Marilyn and said what was lethal for her is that there was no separation between the woman and the girl she played in the movie.
Right. Okay. I notice in here that you said the Beatles somehow escaped the same kind of fate. What is it they did? And there are other examples. What is it they did that let them get away with it?
Well, the people who died, in my opinion, had no idea of who they were. They were just sort of subordinate. They were confused by the media, the pink Cadillacs, the ringing telephones. What the Beatles had is that by and large, they all had loving partners, and where the people who died were abusing amphetamines and alcohol, which cause you to implode. You get sucked into yourself and basically go crazy and lose track of who you are. The drug the Beatles were using was principally LSD, which gives you an outward feeling, a feeling of spaciousness, a feeling of the divine, and they all had loving partners as well. So I'm not suggesting that LSD is a way to find who you are. The Beatles were also very involved in the quest for peace at that time and against the war. So they had a focus on peacefulness and spaciousness and the divine. They were thinking about things other than their own celebrity. These young people, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison, for example, accidentally killed himself the day that he had a contract for a new record company. He came home at 4 a.m, downed 7 phenobarbital in a glass of scotch, which is a recipe for killing yourself.
Sure.
So these famous people were in so much pain that they had no social support. They had no concept of who they were. They felt that who they were is what it appeared on their record album. And the extent to which, I want to avoid sounding silly. I'm not saying remote viewing is a spiritual path, but when you learn to have the experience of spaciousness from remote viewing, then you catch on to the idea that you couldn't possibly be just a physical body. Now, although remote viewing will let you find your car keys and find a parking place and even make money in the stock market, the most important thing you can do with remote viewing is discover who you are. And that's what the end of suffering is about, is to discover who you are and that you're not just a business card.
All right. Well, there's nothing wrong with finding your car keys or making money in the stock market. But as you point out, discovering who you are is a very important path indeed. And how does it differ from the traditional route. I mean, most people who go into remote viewing, frankly, probably do want to make money in the stock market or have the ability to find the car keys or something else. So how does it differ? How does the path differ in your book, The End of Suffering?
People who get very good at remote viewing no longer want to use their ability to make money in the market. The last big project I was involved in, we were forecasting silver commodity futures. And I was working with a spiritual healer, Jane Catra, who's now in Durham. We wrote a book called Miracles of Mind, and our publisher said, well, if you're teaching people to do remote viewing, can't you do it? So we did a formal series where we were correct 11 out of 12 times, and then we had a lot of social pressure to go and do it more and make more money, and neither of us felt like that's what we wanted to do with our attention.
All right. A lot of people in the audience, sorry to interrupt, Russell, a lot of people in the audience heard what you said about Ed Dames, and so they would ask about your own documentation of hits. In other words, how have you documented your successes, and for that matter, what success rate do you claim?
Well, we published that. We published a paper about our experiment. In general, when I die, I'm not going to have a lot of archives. I've basically published everything I know, and we published this experiment and how to do it. A number of people are following what we described, and we published how to use ESP for market timing, and we published that in the Journal of Scientific Exploration. With two people.
But I mean, with specific numbers, what's kind of success rate? Let's say that you're going after the market, or you're going after finding car keys, or something that you can really lay your hands on and say, okay, here's what he did. He found these car keys. He successfully forecasted silver to do the following. Is there some way that you've documented this? Is there something people can put their hands on and say, okay, here you go?
Well, we did silver forecasting in the 80s with a very experienced remote viewer, and we made 9 forecasts over a period of 9 weeks and got them all correct. When our investor wanted to do it twice as frequently, we were not successful. Then a few years ago, when we did it under good conditions, we were 11 out of 12. Now, I wouldn't say that everybody's going to have that kind of rate of success. At SRI, describing things for the government, we were correct about 2/3 of the time. In describing Joe McMoneagle, who's probably the strongest remote viewer we have in America, is correct about 2/3 of the time, doing really hard things, like finding where somebody is hidden, or describing what the Chinese are doing at a bomb test, or looking for a general. He does that correctly about 2 out of 3 times. The third time, when he's wrong, he does not know that that's a wrong trial. So I wouldn't bet a large amount of money on any given remote viewing trial. But Joe,
why is Joe that much more successful than others?
We don't know that. We had a lot of very successful people at SRI. There's Hella Hamid was very successful. She was brought in as a so-called control subject, had never done remote viewing, and I taught her how to do it. Ingo Swann taught everybody how to do remote viewing. He invented remote viewing as we do it, and Ingo is very successful. We had a number of other people. Paul Smith was very successful in the government program. Pat Price was outstanding. And I probably
I think you know, I interviewed Ingo Swann, and he's an amazing man, but he's also reputed to be, I think, one of the best psychics in the country. So,
in a formal study we did at SRI, where Ingo had to describe a binary test describing what we were going to show him the next day. This is something that Ed May did. And in 100 trials, Ingo was correct 80 out of 100, which would be a absolutely outstanding success rate.
Oh, yes.
And all of this stuff is published in archive journals. So the things that we did that were remarkable with Joe was things or Ingo, for example. Ingo was once asked to describe what was happening at a particular site, not today, but 4 days from today. And it turned out to be a Chinese atomic bomb test, which we, of course, didn't know. And Ingo went on to call for colored pencils, because what he wanted to draw was a beautiful, colorful pyrotechnic display that was going to be seen 4 days from now. And it turned out the CIA could tell from that the bomb test they were interested in China would take place but would fail, because what Ingo saw was what you get from burning uranium and not from an atomic bomb. So Ingo was able to cast his attention 10,000 miles to the west and 4 days into the future and very accurately describe what was going to happen there at that time.
All right. Modern physics. I'm very interested, Russell. What modern physics, I think, is kind of drifting toward this whole non-local aspect of things.
Absolutely. Modern physics has given a kind of credibility to what we're doing, because the Buddha said 2,500 years ago that there's no separation in consciousness.
Right.
But when you quiet your mind, your soul, your awareness, your Atman is one with all of physical and non-physical space. That's a 3,000-year-old idea that modern physics has finally caught up with. And I mentioned at the very start of the show that what excites me is a conference put on by the American Association for the Advancement of Science in San Diego, University of San Diego, dealing with how the future affects the past, deals with retrocausality that allows, for example, if you have a dream that comes true the next day, I mentioned the elephant, you have a dream about an elephant in the garden, and then an elephant shows up the next day. For most of us, this is Saturday night, so I would say that the elephant that shows up in the garden Sunday morning is the cause of your dream the previous night. Mm-hmm. So what this scientific conference is about is how the future affects the past, the extent to which we're in a spider web where the future is tugging on the present to actualize the future.
Is it possible to remote view one's own death, Russell? And if it is it possible to either prevent it or in some way change the inevitable outcome?
I don't know if you can forecast your own death. You can certainly forecast what's going to happen the next day. Now, I mentioned earlier that a contract monitor had a dream of an airplane crash, and he didn't take the plane. And in a public blog, somebody said that was our good friend Kit Green, who was our contract monitor, and is a open retired CIA employee, and it was not Kit Green, so I wouldn't want to hurt his reputation. He did not allow his friend to die, and he was busy doing other stuff as a physician. But
I can understand that perhaps at one time you might not take the flight and you might let your friend go, but I'm sure the next time that would occur after that kind of an experience, you'd stop your friend from getting on the plane, whoever it was.
That's right. Once you're validated and confident that that's going to occur. Now, I had an experience once where I was riding my motorcycle, and I began to worry about crashing the motorcycle because of wood in the road. I was just riding along on open highway in Palo Alto where I live, and I normally don't worry about anything. I'm a very experienced motorcycle rider. But I got to worrying about this wood, and I slowed down. As I came around a curve, there was a big 2x4 from a construction site laying right across my path. So I slowed down and just bumped over it instead of crashing. But I was able to psychically tell that there was a board in my future, and because I've learned to recognize those things, I made use of that information and not crash.
Obviously so. Here's something for you, Russell. On the one hand, people tell me, perhaps not you, but other remote viewers certainly tell me, and I bet you would back it up, that you don't have to be a psychic person to do remote viewing. And yet, when you talk about the successes of so many remote viewers, most of the ones you're naming are quite famous psychics, like Ingo.
Well, Ingo, they became famous psychics, as Ingo was a famous psychic. Hella was a control person brought in because she was not psychic. Joe McMoneagle was an Army intelligence officer and photo interpreter. He was not a famous psychic. One of the people I work with a lot was Gary Langford, who's a straight-up physicist working as a photo interpreter. My experience is that remote viewing is like a musical ability. Some people are virtuosos and will go straight to Carnegie Hall. Mm-hmm. Other people will practice and learn to play a little bit on the piano, and that'll make them happy. Most people can learn to do remote viewing. I have had surprising success sitting across the coffee table or the restaurant table, asking people to describe what I've got in my pocket for them or what trinket I have in my briefcase. And with the demand of the moment, most people can do that correctly.
All right, here's another one for you. I inevitably get this question when I do a show on remote viewing, Russell, and that is a blind person. Let's talk about somebody, for example, that's been blind since birth. Now, this person is unable to visualize things because they have never seen things. So could that person remote view? Have you done experiments with people blind since birth?
I did an experiment with a psychologist who was blind from an early age, and he was quite successful describing where somebody was hiding, and it was amusing because he said, I was interviewing him, and he said, I don't know where these people have gone, but my gut feeling is that once you're in this place, it's the kind of place you want to get out of as soon as you can, and where they had gone to was a police station. Now, which would, of course, been a correct way to feel. Ken Ring, who's a psychologist, has written a book about descriptions in out-of-body experiences given by people who've been blind from birth. And in his book, which I read, Kenneth Ring wrote about the very accurate descriptions that congenitally blind people have given from out-of-body experiences.
Okay, so they might look at it or express what they see or feel in a very different way. All right, Russell, hold on. We're coming up on a break point here, so hold tight, and we'll be right back. When we get back, we're going to begin taking calls, so anybody who knows the number and would like to begin lining up to ask Russell a question, you're more than welcome. Remote viewing, the power of the mind. From Manila in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Coast AM. That's right. I'm actually an alien, folks. Welcome back. My guest is Russell Targ, and this hour we're going to obviously go to the phones and allow you to ask Russell a question. Bear with us, if you would, through the technical difficulties. We're kind of working them out as we go, and we'll get it all straight. So anyway, calls with Russell Targ, his new book, don't forget. This is really something I think that many of you who have gone through something like I have gone through or are perhaps nearing retirement might want to look into. It's called The End of Suffering, and it promises to prevent an otherwise seemingly inevitable outcome. With that, we'll be right back with Russell. Once again, Russell Targ is my guest, and we're talking about remote viewing, some of the, more esoteric aspects of remote viewing, I guess. Marcia from Aptos, California says, hey, Art, great to hear you on the airwaves. I'd like to ask Russell a specific description of how to begin to focus our minds. In his opinion, what is the most efficient and effective method?
Most effective way to focus your mind is to find a way to stop the chatter. And John Kabat-Zinn teaches insight meditation. He has a lot of books and tapes. It's basically quieting your mind and focusing on your breathing, which has been taught for millennia. It's principally the intention to sit down and stop the chatter and quiet your mind that begins to give you glimpses of who you actually are. There are lots and lots of people teaching meditation, which is not something that I teach. I'm a meditator, but insight meditation or so-called Vipassana meditation, which is taught at Spirit Rock, is convenient for the caller. Spirit Rock is in Marin, and Jack Cornfield is a wonderful teacher. I spent 10 days in silence with him, which was a life-changing experience. Imagine me keeping my mouth shut for 10 days.
If I can, let me ask you a personal question. Well, I've tried quieting my mind, Russell, and one of the things that I run into is I begin reviewing events in my life. I begin reviewing my own life. I guess that's maybe it's part of the process of quieting your mind. I don't know.
What you learn is that in the beginning, when you start to meditate, ideas keep coming up, and what you have to learn is to not judge yourself. Not to say I'm a bad person or that's a bad idea, but as you sit quietly for 20 minutes, you know it's just an idea. Let it go. Ideas will always come up. It's universal, and you just let them go. There are two pairs of hindrances that the Buddhists talk about that are amusing, and they come in pairs. First of all, people get the idea, this is too hard to do. You've got to be a Superman. I could never do it. And the other hindrance that goes with that is, these people are stupid. This doesn't make any sense. The other pair says, I can't get quiet, and that's matched with, I always go to sleep. So there are lots of familiar problems. Just don't have any big expectation for what's going to happen, and gradually the time between these images bubbling up will get longer and longer.
All right, so the object then is to actually get to the point where you're not thinking about a damn thing, where your mind is completely clear. Is that correct?
Yes, but ideas will always come up, and you just let them go. You let go of the charge. I mean, even a great meditator whose lifelong experience, which of course I'm not, will still have ideas and thoughts bubble up, but he'll just let them go. And in the process of quieting your mind, you get glimpses as to who you really are, and separate you from believing that who you are is what it says on your business card, which is the source of that suffering.
All right, let's go to the phone lines. So I would invite
the caller to go to Spirit Rock to get herself started.
Spirit Rock. All right, here we go. I believe this is going to be the wild card line. You are you're not on the air yet. Let me try again. Wild card line, still not on the air. Let's see. Let's try it this way. Wild card line, now you're on the air. Hi there. You're on the air with Russell, Targ, and Art Bell in Manila.
Good evening, Mr. Bell.
Hi there.
Good evening, Mr. Targ.
Yes, sir.
My father worked at Lockheed for 48 years, and he is the only survivor of his entire group of friends.
Well, I'm happy that he survived. Good for him.
It's because of where he worked. He was a quality assurance officer, and it was away from the manufacturing. But every one of his friends who I knew well, they all passed away.
What were his other interests?
His other interests?
Yeah. What did he do besides work at Lockheed?
He worked 2 jobs and pushed, workaholic. All that whole group of friends of his all worked at this second job as well. And I worked with them as a youth, 14 years old. I am 50 now. That's why I knew all of them. We all carpooled together. I saw them always, 2-3 times a week, weekends. We worked at the sports arena at the LA Coliseum.
Why do you think he survived? Why do you think he survived, caller, when others did not? Why?
Because my father was a quality assurance officer and worked in that clean inspection environment, and all these other fellows worked around some of the experimental stuff in the composite
this is when problems came,
Okay.
and some of the
all right. I've got it. In other words, Russell, he's saying that his father, he thinks, survived not for any other reason other than he was not exposed to the kind of stuff that others were exposed to. You have a very different take on it.
I would say that he found some other meaning in his life in addition to the work he was doing at Lockheed. Because I often saw people. I had an admirable friend who was a meditation teacher, and she would just float up and down the aisles, just a little island of peacefulness by herself. That was really one of my inspirations. Then didn't participate, and it sounds like this fellow's father didn't participate in the ongoing craziness of the plant.
That could well be. All right. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Hello there.
Hello, it's an honor to be on the show. How are you guys doing tonight?
Just fine.
I just wanted to let you guys know, astral projection, have you heard of it?
Of course.
Yeah, astral projection is a name that was given to this in the 19th century. Ingo thought to call astral projection or autoscopy, which is seeing yourself, to give it a more 20th century name called remote viewing. Now, I must say, in astral projection, there's a kind of mix-up between ordinary remote viewing, where you're describing some place and projecting yourself there and actually being there. So astral projection does not separate remote viewing from out-of-body experiences, which we would do today.
Yeah.
Aleister Crowley talks about astral projection and sex on the astral plane, which people are all often interested in. Needless to say, we didn't do that at SRI either.
Yeah, but, it's a very interesting question. I know it's very controversial to bring up on the air, Russell, but let's go ahead and do it anyway. Sex is, for example, very, very involved in astral projection. When I talk to those who are experts in astral projection, they laugh a lot, but they say, yeah, it's a big part of astral projection. What about remote viewing?
Well, it's all what your intention is. That is, when you focus your mind, you can use your psychic ability, your healing, your intention for healing or for confusing somebody. You can use it for describing something in the distance or for discovering who you are. You can have an out-of-body experience to visit Brezhnev in the Kremlin or visit your sweetheart on a distant island. McKinley Cantor wrote a book called Don't Touch Me before he got a Pulitzer Prize for Andersonville. In Cantor's book, he writes about his experiences in Korea, where he had psychic sex with his wife in Los Angeles. He described that very graphically, and he loved his wife, and they had passionate interactions, but it was a time difference that got her, because he was at night and she was trying to drive on the freeway, and her husband would come visit.
I remember that one. All right. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Hello.
Hello, this is Karen in Houston, Art. How are you?
I'm very well, Karen. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Russell, when Skip Atwater came to Houston, he gave like a Friday introduction into, the remote viewing, and then had a workshop on Saturday the next day.
Yes.
And I participated in the whole thing. Friday when I got there, just before I sat down in my chair for the first time, these folding chairs in this little conference room, I had this funny feeling that kind of came over me. And as I sat down in the chair and I looked down at my feet at the floor, I was putting my purse on the floor, I saw this image on one of the tile squares. Well, that image morphed from one image of the head of a lion to one of a gorilla. And the next day, the very last thing that we did at the end of the workshop, he had a sealed envelope that he brought with him to the whole session and had it with him on the airplane. The airplane coming there and through the whole session. And then at the end, he asked, well, what's in this? Well, that image was in the envelope the next day. It was like an Indonesian, like a hut, and it had like these pylons with these round animal head, sculptures that were on top of these pylons. and I had seen the animal heads, is what I had
The gorilla
seen.
of your dreams.
And I don't know that it was in a dream. It's when I sat down, I saw the image. The next day is when it showed up in the envelope. So I was like a day ahead of what was in the envelope.
Yeah, people often talk about the girl of their dreams, so I was just joking with you. Yep, you had the opportunity to see the future, and as you get into a remote viewing session, your mind opens up. The good remote viewing teacher will basically give you permission to expand your awareness and have these different experiences.
Well, at the end of the whole session, as I was leaving, I was one of the last ones out of the room, and I did have this compulsion to turn around and say to him, thank you for giving permission for us to do this. Those were the exact words that I was compelled to say.
That's remote. The reason it's so much fun teaching remote viewing is that remote viewing is so easy to do. And that's what led to the fact that there's now more than 1 million remote viewing sites on Amazon. Now, the New York Times doesn't know that remote viewing exists yet, but more and more of the rest of the world is catching on.
Right. The feeling that comes over you when you have this settle in on you, and I noticed this from the very first time it happened, it's almost like I kind of liken it to what was in Scripture where Jesus said, it's not me that does this, but the Father through me. It almost felt like there was someone else right there totally all over you. And
that's an
they were
interesting
feeding
parallel.
the information to you. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
You know, very, very similar quote from Scripture of John where Jesus is talking about healing. And people want to know, is he a great healer? And Jesus says in more than one place, these things you shall do, and even greater things shall you do. So we have a God-given permission to make use of these abilities for healing and for other things.
It does sound like a parallel, though. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Good morning or something. Hello, West of the Rockies.
Yes, sir.
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having a show full of all the information that you always put out there. And I have two quick questions. The first question is, with remote viewing, ESP, and deja vu, is it more, do you guys find out that it's more gender or family oriented, or, males versus females? And that.
All right, well, there are
Males
some
and
questions
females
there.
are equally psychic. And we don't know if it runs in families. In ESP experiments, there is a better connection generally between members of the same family than between strangers. But there's no preference. There's some very psychic women and very psychic men.
That's interesting. I would have guessed that it would be women that would be more psychic, and I don't know why I would have guessed that. But
you're right, Art. Women have more permission to be psychic, but I just have to say that the great psychics who are out there, if I was going to name the 5 best psychics, they'd probably all be men except for Hella Hammond, because they've been exposed to it. Now, I'd like to respond. Somebody wrote to me at my website, which I'll again say is espresearch.com, where you can write to me if you want to chat. And somebody says, is this remote viewing activity like the mind control activities of the 60s done by the CIA? And the answer is definitely not. We were not doing mind control. In fact, learning to do remote viewing gives you control of your own mind so that other people don't control it. So the learning to do remote viewing is a mind-freeing activity rather than a mind-controlling activity.
is it possible to know if somebody is remote viewing you, Russell? In other words, if you are being observed?
Some of the time, I've had the experience of being very confident that somebody was looking in on me, but I think that in general, there's so much noise ongoing that if somebody wants to snoop on what you're doing, that you probably would not know that unless you're very experienced in making a practice of doing that.
All right. First-time caller line.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. First-time caller line, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Art. Russell. Calling from Chehalis, Washington. This is Aaron.
Yes, sir.
And I was listening to the show, and it brought me back to a time when it was, I'd say about 3 years ago, I had a series of dreams that started from January and ended in September that were about the most vivid dream I've ever had, to the point where it literally, I would come up out of my bed and I was searching for my steering wheel. It was a wreck dream. I would have, I'd be sitting in my truck driving along down this road, and there's trees off to one side, and it was kind of a drop off. And the first dream that I had that involved this was a very short period of time of me driving before I'm basically going off the road into the trees. From January on until about September, they would get longer and longer and longer, and I'd have like 2 or 3 of these dreams a week. I mean, they were super, super intense, almost like taking a section of time out of my life and reliving it. I mean, very, very intense dream. It stopped in September, about mid-September. That October, still hadn't had any dreams. I remember I was in the house. I was getting ready. It was late at night. I was going to head into town, see some friends. I went out. I got into my truck. And as soon as I sat in my truck, I just, boom, I knew it. That whole sequence from me being in the house for like 45 minutes to walking out and getting in my truck was the first portion of the beginning of that dream that I had. And in my dream, I didn't put my seatbelt on. So I threw my seatbelt on, and I've never, ever had that dream since. But I've had a series of things like that. I remember as a child, when I was a teenager and I had some partying time, I could go to a party and I could be there maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe longer, and then all of a sudden I get this overwhelming feeling that police were going to show up and they were going to bust the party. And I would tell them, I'd say, hey, cops are going to show up. And out the door I would go, and I'll be back an hour, half hour. And they just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And I'd come back, and they're like, how did you know?
All right. Well, I guess you just knew.
The moral of the story is to pay attention to your dreams.
That's right.
It's a blessing that you were able to. But I had a neighbor who told my wife that she had a frightening dream that she ran into a woman, and the woman was thrown up on the hood of the car, and our neighbor got to look right into the eyes of the woman she hit and revealed this whole thing to my wife. It was an upsetting dream that she had. And 2 days later, the woman, which she didn't know, of course, jumped out between cars, and she did, in fact, hit the woman, and she was thrown up on the hood of her car and looked into her eyes. So it completely recapitulated the dream.
All right, Russell, we're coming up on a break here. We've got to hold tight, but that's incredible. Russell Targ and remote viewing are the subject. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are, and we virtually cover it all. I'm Art Bell from Manila, Southeast Asia, in the Philippines. Actually, from an area, a pretty big area. You might want to take a look at the Philippines on a map. 7,000. That's 7,000. Okay. Russell, your book, The End of Suffering, interesting. There's a question mark at it. And maybe in the book. I don't have a copy of the book.
No question mark in the book.
All right.
This must be in your communication.
That's right. Somebody sent me a sheet here and put a question mark at the end. So there is no question mark. It is The End of Suffering.
The End of Suffering. In fact, I have an email from somebody who said the Mormons were well acquainted with this idea that when you quit work, if you don't know who you are, you die prematurely. And in the Mormon church, they say Mormons are immediately put to work helping other members of the community, working in the church, and they appear to live forever. So I thought that was interesting.
Interesting indeed. All right, let's go back to the phone lines. Wildcard line, you are now on the air with Russell Targ and Art Bell here in Manila. Hello.
Great, thanks. It's my son's birthday today, too. Happy birthday. I wanted Russell's response to the Catholic practice of willingly receiving suffering through the stigmata, for one, communion, where Jesus is brought into the transubstantiation of the Eucharist, the real presence of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. Talk about your time event. So I just kind of wanted to hear what he had to say about you willingly accepting our own suffering for the redemption of other people's evil that they do.
I think he's saying you don't have to suffer, but I don't want to answer for him.
Suffering is not necessary. There are many paths to experience the divine. I am told that suffering is one of them, as practiced by the Catholic Church. In fact, I saw a bishop who was involved with that practice, who said, yes, we replicate the suffering of Jesus to experience our Savior, and that seems to work for him, but there are millions of other people who feel that quieting their mind, experiencing the divine flow of loving awareness within themselves is a way to experience God, and suffering is not part of that or necessary.
Yeah, I have a very hard time with the concept of godliness being right next to suffering. I don't know. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Kathy in northwest Georgia. I wanted Russell's take on something. My sister and I have had the same dream the same night. One night, it was a very vivid dream. I could feel the rain on me. We could see the house, describe the house. Her fiancé came through the house at that time, and he's been having the same dream, same house for the last 12 years.
Oh, my God.
Well, I know
that's
that twins
pretty weird.
frequently will share a dream, because I know a pair of identical twins who talk to me about often going down to their father the next day and telling them about the dream they had.
But we aren't twins. We're 2 years apart.
But you must be close to one another. So I'm just saying that the idea of shared dreams is something that I am familiar with. And it just is a manifestation of the closeness of the two of you to each other.
Yeah, but you know, Russell, it kind of sets up another question, and that is whether there's, we keep talking about the power of the mind. There must be some kind of signal, some kind of energy, some kind of transmission that's made. I mean, there's some medium, obviously, by which all of this information moves. We just don't know what it is yet. We can't monitor this frequency. We can't detect the energy, but it has to be there somewhere, doesn't it?
Well, there's certainly a connection, and I think that these shared dreams come sort of from the geometry rather than from the energy. That's something that Archibald Wheeler said, that if we're going to understand consciousness, it's going to be through the geometry of space rather than through the energy. That is to say, our awareness fills all of space-time, both yours and mine. So we can experience each other's awareness. We can experience each other's consciousness because there's no separation from one to the other. And the reason that scientists say that is that it's no harder for me to know what's on your mind in Manila than it would be for me to know on your mind if you're sitting across the room from me. Since the distance doesn't interfere with our psychic contact at all, it makes it look like a non-local connection rather than an energetic connection.
Right. Well, even if it's a non-local connection, though, do you feel that someday some physicist, some scientist is going to be able to come up with something that will be able to measure this energy, record this frequency, or in some way nail down how this communication is occurring?
I agree with the last part. I think that a scientist will be able to explain how this communication is occurring. I think that precognition is a senior ability. I think that principally our awareness is free to move in time. We hugely misunderstand the nature of time. I think our understanding of time is really childish and incorrect. And I say that because we know for a fact that things in the future can affect us at an earlier time. So the idea of linear time is just doesn't describe what's going on. The future affects us even before that future is manifested. So that's why I'm so excited about this AAAS conference, talking specifically two physicists about retrocausality.
All right. Let's go east of the Rockies. You're on the air with Russell Targ. Hello.
Hi, this is Charlie. I'm a retired person in Ormond Beach, Florida, and I've been seeing things for years. And I want to know if what I'm seeing is possible. Is it possible to remote view the entire universe and its contents? That's what I've been seeing for years.
Well, no, you can't do that because the universe is essentially infinite and you're only finite.
That's not what I see. I see very clearly things. I see the dark energy is racing towards, in increasing velocity, towards the dark matter spherical end to man's universe. That's number one. I also see man's closest next in proximity universe to be in great abundance all around him, and that to be the atoms all around him.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can when you say I can see the whole unit, a psychic can see anything he wants to see. What we used to say at Stanford is that a person can answer any question psychically, but because your brain is finite, you can't know everything. Since there's infinitely many things to know, so you can't know infinitely many things. But you can indeed you can answer any question that's asked to you that has an answer.
Yeah, but the big $64 million question, Russell, is how does one separate one's imagination and fantasy from something that's real? How do you do that?
That can be done with practice. That's not so hard. It's an important question, but remote viewing and psychic functioning is an intellectual task, and with practice, that's what any of the remote viewing teachers give you, and we describe how to do that in the End of Suffering, by the way. We describe the program for teaching that we did at SRI to separate the psychic signal from the mental noise of memory and imagination and analysis. You just have to give up your conditioning, and the secret, the remote viewing secret is you have to give up your desire to name the thing you're seeing. If you can just describe the experience and give up the naming, you've made a huge step toward learning to do remote viewing.
All right, but in that process, as you're going through it, I've tried a few times, to be honest with you, Russell, and I get images and I get ideas and I get thoughts, but I can't know that I'm separating them in my mind. I can't know that it's not my mind just, doing what a mind does. And how, if you can give us, I know it's in your book, but if you can give me a sort of a 101 on how to separate fantasy.
Learning to do remote viewing is a two-person game. It's very hard to do by yourself. And what we describe is that you find a friend to bring you an object in a bag. And this is not a double-blind scientific experiment. But your friend will say, I've brought you something interesting. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Will you sit down quietly with a pencil and paper and describe your impressions? What are you experiencing with regard to what I brought you? And you'll say, I see something that's round. It's shiny. And he'll say, draw that. So you'll draw this round, shiny thing, and then he'll take it out of the bag and hand it to you. And you will say, well, that's very much like what I was seeing. I missed this part, and I added in that part. So you get immediate feedback as to which parts of your mental activity are correct and which parts you made up. So next time you'll do that, you'll say, aha, I have a tendency to call a thing, see something that looks like a sombrero whenever it's round. I got to drop the sombrero stuff and just say it's round. Okay. So you learn the things that make noise for you, but it requires a friend to provide you with targets and then give you feedback.
All
and
right.
You can quickly learn to do that.
Wildcard Line, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Good morning.
Hey, Art, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right, sir.
All right, this is Eric from Indiana. The question I had for your guest, well, to give you a scenario of my background, when I was in the military, I was what you might consider a seasoned lab rat. When I say that, what I mean is they had me involved in mind control, human cloning, you name it, I was in it. And anyway, one of the projects I was lab ratted for was what I call out-of-body extraction. The project name was acronymed after the seventh planet called Uranus, Ultra-Range and Navigation Unified System. And I was wondering if your guests have ever heard of that project before.
Well, I certainly haven't.
When was it?
I don't know. He was involved in so many projects. I'll tell you what. I have not taken a break yet, so let me take a break. We'll come right back and wrap up. Stay right there. This is Coast to Coast AM. A caller whose name is Hugh from Richardson, Texas, says, hey, Art, I agree with Russell. I work for, he mentions, a very large company for 34 years. A document crossed my desk that stated those retirees that waited till 65 years of age received an average of 17 retirement checks. You believe that?
That's exactly right. That means that they lasted a year and a half.
That's unbelievable.
Wildcard
line,
problem.
Yeah, Wildcard line, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Hello.
Hey, what's up, Art? What's up, Russell?
You at the moment, sir.
Yeah, this is Big John calling from Phoenix, Arizona.
Uh-huh.
I got a question. Do you have to be in the awake state or dream state to do RV?
In general, you can't do it when you're asleep because it's an intellectual activity. In the dream state, every kind of crazy monster in your subconscious will come bubbling up. You may have a precognitive dream, and we can help you learn to separate out the anxiety dreams from the precognitive dreams. If you want to do remote viewing, you have to be awake and paying attention.
Okay, because I've had psychic experiences when I've been awake, and also in the dream state too, like precognitive dreams.
Yes, you can definitely have precognitive dreams. That's generally the first psychic experience a person has is a precognitive dream, where the future intrudes on the dream.
Yeah. Do you have any tools that you can use when you're in that state? Like anything? Is there anything you could tell me that so I could focus?
Well, the tools to use is to learn lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
So that you can wake up in your dreams. Stephen LaBerge teaches this. He's got a couple of books. So you want to go to sleep. The specific tool to use
is like clear your head out. And
I'm going to tell you is when you go to sleep, you say to yourself, "When I am dreaming, I will notice that it's a dream." And you say that to yourself a couple of times as you're going to sleep. So when something crazy appears in your dream, you consider that a dream sign. Like you notice that all the cars in your dream are driving backwards. Say, well, that's probably not actually happening. I'm probably dreaming. And at that point, you can take control of your dream.
Huh. So you're saying if you notify yourself before you go to sleep that if something really wild happens in a dream, you will wake up but continue to dream? Is that correct?
You wake up in the dream, and then you can have a lucid dream and go flying away or do all kinds of psychic things.
That's incredible. All right. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Russell Targ.
Hello?
Hello? Hello? Are you there? Going once. Going twice. Okay. First time caller line, you're on the air with Russell Targ. Hello.
Hello, Art. Russell.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm a psychic myself, and I've been psychic all my life. It's just that in the past 10, 15 years, I've been experiencing a lot more. I predict nature. I can't read minds. I basically can feel and sense earthquakes and volcanoes when they're going to happen. I predicted 9/11 and also the tsunami that happened.
Well, 9/11, wait a minute, 9/11 was not a natural event.
Right. A lot of people knew about it, and it was their energy of knowing about it before it happened is what I was able to read off of.
I see. Well, I was about to agree with you on the natural events. I think, and Russell may want to comment on this. Russell, do you think there's a connection between large natural events like, for example, earthquakes, volcanoes going off, earth moving type events, and the human psyche or
people
consciousness?
will often know about these things before they occur, but what's not clear is whether they actually are affected by the thing before it happens, or whether they're precognizing what they read about in the paper. Because William Dunn wrote a very good book called Experiments in Time, and he talks about he was a aviation engineer and wrote this book about his dream research, and he would have dreams about natural disasters, and what he caught on to is that he was dreaming about his reading of them in the newspaper the next day.
Huh.
So it's hard. So it's you can't tell whether it's precognition of your information from the newspaper or precognition of the event. And the reason he noticed that is that he wrote down in his dream journal that an explosion occurred and 40,000 people were killed. And that's what the newspaper said, but it was a mistake. It was 4,000 people killed. And the following week, the paper from where the distant place corrected itself and said, we didn't mean 40,000, we meant 4,000, but he had already recorded the error in his dream journal, so it was absolutely clear that he was forecasting what he would see the next day.
That's remarkable. All right, your book, I take it The End of Suffering is available, Amazon, all the usual places.
Yes,
is it
available
out
from Amazon
on shelves?
or from my website, espresearch.com. Either way.
All right, well, I hope it sells well. How long has it been out now?
Since April.
Since
And
April.
I'm getting a lot of heartfelt letters from people who said that although I've written lots of stuff about psychic abilities, this is a book that actually changed people's lives by telling them why they should bother with ESP and how learning who they really are is a life-changing experience.
Well, I'm sure it would do exactly that, and it's a book I would like to have myself, Russell, so if you get in the mood to fire one off toward Manila, I think I'd like to read it, since
I'm
I just
happy
went
to
through
do that.
something.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be on with you.
All right, my friend, good night.
Good night.
And listen, everybody, it's been a pleasure. We've had a few technical glitches, but we'll get all of that worked out. From Manila in Southeast Asia, the capital of the Philippines, 7,107 islands, very beautiful islands, I might add. I'm Art Bell. It was a pleasure to be here. See you tomorrow night. Good night, all.